Good evening. Welcome to our gathering here in May, month 2 of the journey of reimagining and rediscovering pulse, listening. Pulses as a joyous approach to tuning into the world that you're working with, the client, his aliveness, his process, and thereby opening, but rather being the space within which organic and natural change can happen. You know, it's so far removed, imagining yourself as being the person who makes the change happen, or even the person who facilitates the change, although that's certainly not a bad word, to being the person who holds the space where that happens. So it's not happening despite you, of course, it's not happening without you, but it's not happening through your doing. It's happening through a skillful holding of space. But before I talk more about that, let's, as usual, settle into a bit of a feeling exercise meditation type thing. So sit comfortably. You could conceivably do this lying down, but probably it'll be easier to stay awake for this if you sit. And with eyes closed, feel into the quality of the space within your own inner energetic space. And the space that surrounds you. Feel into what that space, that inner and outer space, in this moment seem to be made of. What's the quality? Or we might say the texture of the space as you perceive it. If your mind wasn't protesting my instructions, can you relate to there being such a thing as the texture of the room, of the space within and without? When your mind lets you, you will find that the experience itself of moments having textures is really familiar. It's ancient. And as we feel invited to describe every one of our experiences in words, and in words that make sense, and a kind of sense that can be confirmed by some objective measurement, we either unlearn to perceive these textures that moments always have, or we forget to pay much attention to them. And did you know the feeling of entering a room and feeling the air is thick with tension or heavy with some unspoken emotion, or thin and hardly breathable, and a variety of other things? You know those moments when you say spring lies in the air, or rain, or love is in the air, that famous song. And as you perceive the quality of your inner space and the space that surrounds you in this moment, as you are perceiving it as dense or not, as lighter or heavier, charged or less charged, close or more distant, tangible or more ineffable. As you are feeling any of these qualities and notions that are so familiar, so old, ancient, primordial to the way we all orient in the world, the physical world and the other worlds, as you pick up these qualities in whatever way this moment allows, allow whatever sensation it is that you're having to seep into you, to penetrate on cell level, to penetrate your sensitivity, and as it does, resonate within, allow your comprehension, your understanding of it, your knowing of it to become deeper and deeper, not necessarily as something you could put in words or describe to anyone but yourself, but a knowing that is as deep, as personal, and as indelible as, say, remembering the scent at your grandmother's house or some such thing. Oh, this smells exactly like grandma's, or like grandma herself. We are beings who learn so much and remember so much implicitly through sensation, through smells and sounds, and not just the what can I hear, but the how do I hear it, what flavor, what quality does it have, or what texture. Once you've reconnected with how primal this is, this way of perceiving, it has hopefully whet your appetite to do this in more moments in your life. Feel into the texture. What is this moment made of? What is the air in this room made of? What is the vibration in this forest I'm having a walk in made of? And feel what your being present to the situation in that way does. At least to the way you perceive the situation, but possibly to the situation itself. That simple tool I just gave you is not in this month's online study circle. It's not in the exercises around pulse textures. The exercises around pulse textures are more specifically geared towards the 6 distinct things we can feel specifically at our fingertips, and yet to stay in listening and get a sense of why would we want to know textures? Why would we not just want to know where is it loud and what does that tell me? Where is the subject of next month, as I already announced last month, if I'm not mistaken, but to get a sense of, when I feel into what is this moment made of, what's the texture of this moment, what is the texture of my inner and outer space, what is this space made of, I am tuning into something that is both very real and very subtle and very real. The fact that it is ineffable, that you can hardly put words to it and that you can't pin it down, that it isn't measurable, doesn't mean that it isn't very, very real and it doesn't tell you something. It just points to the fact that you are keying in with texture to a very subtle level, indeed, what we call the unmanifest level in Jinshin Jitsu. So as we continue our journey through the different layers and levels of pulse listening, we will, of course, get to more specific what aspects of pulse listening and how loud and where, but the quality that we're learning to tune in first speaks of a more subtle level, and so therefore it speaks of a more causal level, of a level that is deeper than the where and what that we will also get to. In other words, if later on we may feel, oh, liver function is crying out to me, or spleen function, or first depth, or fifth depth, or whatever it is, if we also pick up the texture level, what's this moment made of, we are probably feeling a level that lies behind this next thing we feel. That's not always to say that's the real reason, but it certainly is what's behind it, what underlies it at a subtler level. So that's something to play with, for you to discover. Again, as I am journeying into pulses with everyone in these 5 months, I am very aware that I'm using a very different approach from the, all right, let's pinpoint what this person needs. The very notion of pinpointing is actually contrary to a deeper understanding of what listening is, and more importantly, what listening does. Listening opens the space for change, listening holds the space for change, listening knowingly forgoes, say again, knowingly forgoes the temptation of pinpointing. You don't want to be held at needlepoint, and neither does anyone else, for that matter. So being pinned down to this is what's wrong with you and we will fix it, that wasn't very kind, but at least I was mocking a German accent, so I'm allowed to do that. Not pinpointing someone, not sticking someone to something in particular, not being focused on what's wrong and how to fix it, but saying, this living organism will find out where it wants to go next, and this living process of me listening to the different options that are available, not to me in order to act, but to the organism and to us, if anything, me as a practitioner and they as a client together. That just changes the quality of what happens. Let's go deeper. And, if that is what you want to do, it is also a lot more satisfying to go that route. So again, the journey of 5 months of reimagining pulse listening can be a soft and repeated invitation to realize just how rewarding it is to you and to your clients if there's less pinpointing happening, which doesn't mean there's less keen looking. There's very keen looking and listening happening. The gaze is no less sharp, it's just less cutting. It's less limiting, it's less pinpointing. But that doesn't mean it's less precise, it just has a different precision. The precision of compassion rather than the precision of analysis. No diagnosing, no healing, no curing in Jiu-Jitsu, Mary Burmeister said. With that, I come to the questions for the evening, or rather the feedback and questions from Taj. Thank you very much for submitting this. And I love what's in here on so many levels. So it starts out with something I want everybody who is on the brink of should I, shouldn't I join this? Can I believe what he's promising or not? Listen to with big ears. Last month, hello Matthias, she says, last month you guaranteed we would all be able to feel pulse textures by the end of this second month. I must admit, I thought, well, maybe for everyone else, but not for me. But that's not the way it's working out. I can feel them, and it is so great just to have all this time to get familiar with the textures without worrying about which organ, depth, safety, energy lock they might be connected to. Just a joyful curiosity. What's there now? See, and the what's there now is what we practiced just now with the feeling exercise, except we didn't do it at the wrists. And as I said, in the study circle, we find textures at the fingertips, and I explain in detail what I mean by that. And, I'm not in the business of guaranteeing anything, because it's not a teacher's job to guarantee anything for the most part, because I'm not in charge of anyone's learning experience. I mean, I'm not in control of everyone's learning experience. And if indeed I decided quite consciously to go ahead and say, I guarantee you that by the end of a month, if you do this daily, you will be able to pick them up. It's because I know how many people are just like Taj. Literally saying, yeah, well, maybe everybody else, but not me. Literally. This is also what happens when, for example, in module 1 of my foundational training, this 5 days with the safety energy locks, I have sometimes asked students to pair up, ask the partner they are doing the exercise with, so what's going on for you right now, what's moving you right now? And then they let the other person talk. And after 3 to 5 days of class, they'll just listen to what the other person's telling them about what's, I deliberately don't say bothering them, but what's going on with them, what's moving them in the moment. And because at that point we have spent a few days talking about who the safety energy locks are, not what they are to be used for, but who they are, what basic impulses of life and the unfoldment of life they represent, I invite participants then to let themselves, to listen until they feel themselves drawn to a certain energy lock and its flow. So especially the ones who are beginners, but often also the ones who are quite advanced, protest loudly and say, you can't ask this of me, this is my first class, I don't know anything, I don't know the energy locks, I don't know what flow to do. I say, just trust the process, just go with it. I'll be there to help you if you need me. And the ones who protested most loudly that they would be able to do this abstract thing are the ones who most fierily confirm when they actually allow themselves to sink into that process and listen to what the person's talking about, and then relax and feel into who the energy locks are to themselves. They are the ones who most loudly affirm how wonderful it felt when they found out that not only were they able to do it, they were eager to do it and enjoying doing it. So anyway, the reason I got to the point of promising is because I just simply know that your mind is perfectly capable of preventing you from staying at your fingertips with your perception for any length of time. But I can guarantee that anyone who touches rubber and allows themselves not to shut off their perception will sense rubber. Anyone who touches silk, or anything who touches something wet, will feel that this feels silky and this feels wet, and so on and so forth. So I just know that there isn't a person who has functioning nerve endings in their fingers who has any valid reason not to feel this. It's just literal. It's at the fingertips. It is as literal as touching physical textures. So, just a joyful curiosity. What's there now? Taj writes and continues. Also, it's been a lovely sleuthing experiment with your self-help exercise, moving from the general pulse texture at my wrist to holding the finger of its depth until I'm satisfied, and then rechecking. Yeah, that's exactly the instruction. Hold it until you're satisfied. In other words, don't go for a number of minutes, but just until, oh, this feels about right, this feels complete, and then check again. What a cool way to progress through a holding of my fingers practice. Pulse and breath are so fundamental to life, so easily taken for granted or outright ignored. Everyone could benefit from these 2 first lessons, Jinshinjutsu oriented or not. Thank you for saying that, Taj. I deeply believe so too. And how to say that and not sound like I'm just doing my marketing, I'm still in the process of learning. I just honestly do not just believe, but know that this is of benefit, obvious benefit to everyone, because listening into the world that surrounds us and listening into the world that we are, will have a harmonizing effect on ourselves in any and every case, and will always help us be a better friend, a better intimate partner, a better parent, a better child, a better colleague, a better anything. You know, just slowing down and feeling what's there right now and finding a tone that doesn't just smash and crush any delicacy and detail that's present in the moment. I mean, it's really very useful for the world we're living in. I mean, in these very present times, but always. I'm beginning to suspect there is a way the art works between the pulse and safety energy locks, Taj continues, and there must be a good reason why we don't just hang out at the pulse for the order of transformation. Maybe you could say more about that? Yes, I certainly can. There actually isn't a reason for that, Taj, or there isn't. It's legitimate to want to know what to act on, what to work with. Then in that case, you probably would go on from pulse listening rather quickly. One reason why we don't always or don't often hang out at the wrists listening for just the pulse texture until the texture itself goes through the order of transformation is because trusting that we're entering the process of listening at the opportune moment. In other words, what I'm hearing the second I hear my client's pulses is what I am to trust. I don't necessarily need to hang around and double check and triple check and quadruple check and quintuple check and sextuple check. How far can we take this? Myself. Because then my doubting mind will take charge of the process. So, in order to prevent the doubting mind from taking charge of the process and often ruining it, it's good to just listen, and as soon as I've made out a texture, if I'm following the indication of the texture, use what I felt first. However, now that you have brought it up, next time it feels right to do so when you see a client, to just hold their pulses and feel into their pulses and how they change and see how much of the order of transformation is gone through as you listen to the pulses. You'll find that that is also a wonderful way of accompanying change. So of course you would be at the wrist in touch with the tune, let's say, of the total being in the moment. Yeah. So what is the total being attuned to in the moment? That's what's showing up in the texture at the wrist, if it's showing up in under all your pulse listening fingers equally. And when you go to a safety energy lock, then you are going to a place that has its own vibration and job or jobs to do, and is its own personality, its own impulse, its own basic feeling. And listening to that particular topic go through a cycle of transformation is different and necessarily happens more often and more quickly than listening to what chord the total person is tuned into the moment for a longer time. So to make that distinction again, it often makes sense to go to individual safety energy locks and or organ flows, which are all held through safety energy locks, to see if the general tune the person is singing to changes, rather than just staying with the general tune the person is singing to in the moment, which is what we are hearing in the texture at the wrist. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. Doesn't mean it can't be done. It absolutely doesn't. So again, as the artist, you are the one who finds that out, who feels out whether that is appropriate, who finds out whether that's what's working now. Here's my amazing experience with this month based off your self-help experience. Self-help exercise, sorry. I was away for 2 weeks and exposed to sick people, some even with COVID. At the first inkling, I guess, of a sore throat, I reached immediately for the small intestine flow, remembering your strong admonition about sore throats and small intestine, with good results, I might add. Airplanes and airports included lots of that flow and spleen, based on what I learned in the recently completed organ function energy course. Nonetheless, I arrived home with a cold, which I hoped was nothing more. The next morning, wondering what organ function energy flow to use on myself, I listened to my pots, which had a fourth depth quality, texture in other words. Choosing to do the kidney flow, I let myself settle into the order of transformation. Spent a long time on the first 2 safety energy locks at the start of kidney flow, before doing similar with the next safety energy lock pair. Not sure I completed the entire flow sequence before I fell into a deep, multi-hour sleep and woke a different person, with clarity and energy like what had been missing for days. Hallelujah. I was able to attend a party the following day. So thank you, Taj, for sharing that story, because again, it brings to this nice, but to some of you perhaps airy seeming or airy sounding notion that listening is in itself a way of acting. You know, it sounds nice, it sounds pleasant, but is it good enough when somebody is really sick? So it gives specifics and fodder and depth and material to that question, or as an answer to that question. It's specifically in those situations. You know, if you think, all right, well, this isn't a moment to just listen and hang out and spend a long time, this is a time to choose the right flows and do them efficiently, well, you miss what tune is the being singing to that it would like listened to so deeply that the tune can change, you know. So that deep total regeneration that comes from kidney function energy, when kidney is the right flow, is what appears here in Taj's story. Now, some of you out there may say, yeah, well, we knew that kidney is good for the immune system, so it was the right flow to do, but that's not how she got there. And it wouldn't have necessarily worked on everyone in just that way, whereas tuning into where is my being right now? What does it need? How long does it want it for? Am I respecting the cycle of its transformation? You know, when we touch safety energy locks, the order of transformation, which I've gone through in past webinars here, past Q&As that you can still watch on this channel, is this process where in the beginning there's almost nothing that you can feel, right? So the energy lock or place you are touching doesn't seem to be responding. But then something starts happening, and then it gets quite vivid, and it almost seems to want to push your fingers away, and then it starts to dense down a bit, and then it's eventually very solid, and then it seems to dissolve again. It seems to like melt under your fingers, and eventually all feels very fluid and soft. That, in short, is the 6-step order of transformation, right? So, finally, there is an organ function energy question that Taj submitted. I value a teacher who has the desire and is creative enough to help me have my experience of his experience. Regarding the organ function energy circulation patterns, I've spent time learning them, tracing them over my body. A fun and pleasurable game, I have spent time with your feeling exercises. I have enjoyed finding expressions in my daily living of the qualities of each of the organ personalities. I appreciate the health benefits of using different flow sequences on myself, and yet I can't really say I noticed the circulation pattern in my body. Something in me would like that experience, whatever it is. I'm not complaining, but I'm curious. What's your experience of the organ function energy as a circulation inside your body? As usual, with much appreciation and gratitude, Taj. Well, thank you for that question, because when I read it this morning, it brought a smile to my face as I realized that, that is something I have been perfectly happy to rely on hearsay about. What we are told about organ function energy in Jiu-Jitsu and meridians in acupuncture is that very sensitive people, masters of sorts, have felt them in their own body. To the best of my knowledge, Mary never made the claim that she felt them. Haruki Kato never made the claim that he did. And so I was always perfectly content just going by what they said. But then, and this is what is different in my organ flow presentation, taking it, bringing it to life by taking it into my physical body as a work in progress, as something that is just forming, that is just in formation. And so I have felt into what it's like when different parts of my body are active, and have related that to the organ function circulation pattern as reported by Jiro Murai. Do I feel lines of energy in my own body that resemble those drawn in Mary's textbooks or Jiro Murai's original drawings? I don't. Quite honestly, I don't. What I do feel, however, are both qualities, vibratory qualities of something that's happening in my body, but also relationships between different body parts. So, for example, with the spleen flow, I will so often feel the base, the perineum area, but I'd rather not name it anatomically, but I feel something that feels like it's truly my base, coming very much alive. I feel the 5 really opening up into the world. And I could give you many more examples of feeling not literally a flow of energy through my body, but this lengthening all the way to down there, or this softening all the way down the back of the body, for example, bladder flow. Simple one is stand with straight legs and bend forward and see how close to the floor you can get or how far down. Do a bladder flow on one side, try again, do it on the other side, try again. And then you will feel that that whole region on the back side of the body where bladder flow is reported to flow through will have relaxed, and you can get further down. So that's verification of the physical effect of it. That seems to be consistent with the circulation pattern that's indicated. On very rare occasions have I felt, as I was receiving a session, like something was running down the outside of my leg, for example. It felt like I had water running down the outside of my thigh. And the flow that was being applied was the gallbladder flow, which has that circulation pattern, and I didn't know that at the time. So sometimes there are flow experiences, but for the most part, I haven't really gone for that, and I haven't really felt a need to doubt that this reality as described by Jiro Murai could be real if you had that level of sensitivity. But your question makes me want to investigate that further. I mean, check into it more closely yet. When I do a stomach flow on myself, feeling this side of the sinuses free up and feeling a lengthening into the opposite leg is a common experience of mine, which I clearly relate to the circulation pattern. But once again, those are the kinds of excerpts of flow patterns that I do feel specific lines that go all the way through. No. So in that sense, Taj, you may indeed say that I have been, with the organ function course, a teacher who helps you to have your experience of my experience, right? My experience being what I just described. And I believe that, yeah, that kind of experience is probably what most anyone who has followed the organ function course has also been able to have. So let's stay in this conversation about what anyone out there might feel in terms of actual circulation patterns in their bodies. One of the reasons I haven't found it terribly important to research this is that I've always been open to the fact that quite possibly the things that are described as actual circulation patterns in the body are only the sensory reflections of the way the body informs itself, so to speak. Yeah? The way body building intelligence travels through the body. And it has many ways of doing that, biochemically and along nerve pathways and through all the body tissues that we have available. So whether what we commonly call ki or chi or energy in Oriental medicines, as they are westernized, may be energy in the Western sense of the word or not. But since working with the assumptions that have been made for 2,500 years in Oriental medicine has a pretty good track record of working, I've just followed it that way. And I'm always curious about what comes next. Thank you for all your feedback and questions and input. That brings us to the end for this evening. Taj's submission was the only one I got this month, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you again in June. Members of the study circle, members of Reimagining Pulse Listening, be expecting an email from me in the next few days about the Kajabi communities setting that I'm a little behind the schedule I had set for myself to activate that feature. Anyone else who would like to sign up for my newsletter or check out the different offers on my online courses or see the calendars of live events, here are the links to those. Have a lovely evening, everyone, and see you next month.